India has one of the world's most extensive collections of ancient texts. They're known as the Vedas. Written thousands of years ago in Sanskrit, the language of the gods, they contain a literal mountain of knowledge. However, the Vedas have been ignored by most of the world because they contain information that does not conform with our current belief systems. Scholars in the Western world would have you believe our history is accurate and thoroughly documented. For example, they assure us that humans like us have only existed for 200,000 years. But this so-called fact has been contradicted by the discovery of footprints, bones, and artifacts that were later found to be millions of years old. These discoveries align with the writings of ancient India, which tell us that humanity has always been present on Earth. The scientific community works hard to debunk inconsistencies in our past, but researchers like Michael Cremo are not afraid to look closely at the evidence and draw their own conclusions.
When I first encountered the descriptions in the ancient Sanskrit writings of India of humans existing in the very, very distant past, going back many millions of years, I was inspired to start looking into the history of archaeology, because if you look in the current textbooks of archaeology and anthropology, you don't see any evidence for extreme human antiquity. You only see the discoveries that are consistent with the dominant paradigm in science today about human origins, which posits that humans like us evolved from more primitive ape-like ancestors fairly recently in the Earth's long geological history. Most scientists today would say that the first humans like us came into existence less than 200,000 years ago. But I thought, let me look beyond the textbooks. Let me look at the original scientific reports and see what's actually there. When I started actually looking into the original scientific reports from the time of Darwin up to the present, I was genuinely shocked to find that there were many cases of scientists reporting finding human bones, artifacts, and footprints going back many millions of years. So my 8 days of research turned into 8 years because one case led to another until finally I had enough evidence to fill up a 900-page book, Forbidden Archaeology.
According to Western science, there isn't much purpose to life other than ensuring the survival of the human species. The same scientists also suggest that after death, there is nothing. All electrical and biochemical activity in the brain ceases, and consequently, everything that was held in the brain, including consciousness, disappears. They tell us this while admitting they don't even know what consciousness is or what it does. The ancient Sanskrit writings of India have a very different view by explaining consciousness and precisely what it means to be human.
The ancient Sanskrit writings of India, the Vedic literature, is a repository of all kinds of knowledge. The most essential part of it is understanding the real nature of human life. Today, most scientists would say that a human being is just a machine made of molecules. And as far as consciousness and mind are concerned, those are just temporary byproducts of bioelectrical activity in the brain. And most scientists today would say when the chemical reactions in the brain stop at the time of death, then there's no more consciousness, no more life, there's nothing. So, the ancient Sanskrit writings of India have a different idea about consciousness, that it has its own independent existence apart from matter. They would say consciousness is not produced produced by chemicals in the brain. Consciousness does not evolve up from matter. Rather, consciousness has its own independent existence. It's neither created nor destroyed, but it can come into contact with matter and become covered by it. But then, if consciousness identifies with the temporary covering of matter that we call a body, then it experiences some discomfort, because if you identify with something that you're not, then you get into feelings of discomfort. And according to the ancient Sanskrit writings of India, the purpose of life is to restore consciousness to its original pure state, free of its contact with matter. So that is the most essential truth, that can be found in the ancient Sanskrit writings of India. And of course, this idea that consciousness has its own independent existence means that at the time of the death of this covering that we call the body, the conscious self continues to exist. Now, if it has some unfulfilled material desires, then it will get another material covering. So the conscious self, if it retains material desires, will continue to reincarnate on this level of reality, lifetime after lifetime, until finally its material desires are exhausted and it can return to the eternal state of pure consciousness on a higher level of reality, and the cycle of reincarnation thus ends.
Most people think the history of aviation is well documented. They believe the Wright brothers became the first team to achieve flight with a pilot in December of 1903. From there, aircraft development commenced rather quickly, and by early 1914 the first scheduled air service began in Florida. However, according to the ancient Sanskrit writings of India, highly advanced aircraft flew around our planet long before the Wright brothers came along. Many references to vehicles called vimana can be found in the Mahabharata. The Sanskrit epic tells the tale of an incredible battle fought with these machines thousands of years ago.
Sanskrit writings of India tell us about flying craft, spaceships that were used by human civilizations on this planet and other planets long ago. Sometimes these accounts go back thousands of years or even millions of years. One of the ones that goes back about 5,000 years happens to be about a king named Shalva. And on this planet and on other planets, there have always been two kinds of rulers or populations, those more on the side of darkness and those who are more on the side of light. Ultimately, according to the ancient Sanskrit writings of India, we're all beings of pure consciousness. None of us are originally from the world of matter. We're now in kind of an alternative reality system for conscious selves that aren't fit to exist on that higher level of reality. So among the conscious selves on this level of reality, there's one group that's trying to get more and more deeply involved in trying to dominate, control, and exploit the resources of matter for selfish purposes and competition with each other. King Shalva was in that group. On the other hand, there's another group of persons who are trying to understand their nature as beings of pure consciousness. And their attitude towards matter is, let's try to satisfy our material needs in the most simple, natural, efficient, fair, and equitable way possible, while putting most of our human energy into developing the resource of consciousness. So these two groups have always been in conflict with each other. We can see in the world today there are groups that are trying to increase conflict, exploitation, and then there are groups that are trying to move in another direction. So King Shalva was in this dark group, and he wanted weapons to help him in his efforts. So according to the ancient Sanskrit writings of India, there's life not only on this planet, but on other planets in the solar system and throughout the universe. And there are even different levels of reality in the cosmos, different dimensions of nature, and they're all inhabited. And basically you can find these two groups throughout the cosmos. So this King Shalva was in touch with Maya Danava, who was the engineer of the forces of darkness at higher levels in the cosmos. And this Maya Danava manufactured a flying machine for King Shalva. It was made of metal and it was delivered to King Shalva. So he used this spaceship and he used this airplane to attack the city of Dwarka, which was one of the cities occupied by the forces of goodness and light. It was the city of Lord Krishna, who is the supreme conscious being. So King Shalva used this spaceship to attack the city of Dwarka, and there are elaborate descriptions of this spaceship in the Bhagavad Purana, one of the historical writings of ancient India. And it's said that Shalva used energy beam weapons, which were like thunderbolts, to attack the city of Dwarka. He was using it to set fires and destroy opposing forces. And it said that this spaceship that he had, duplicate images of it would appear in different places simultaneously, so that the defenders of the city of Dwarka who were trying to shoot it down couldn't do it. And in that sense, this spaceship possessed technology reminiscent of modern military technology, whereby a military, they designed the warheads so that they can project false images to the enemy's radar system. It's also stated that this spacecraft was able to move in all different directions by the power of mind. And again, this is something that's reminiscent of modern military technology. So our military and other militaries around the world have developed technologies whereby a pilot can control the high-speed jet aircraft mentally or by eye movements detected by computer. So it's very interesting to find descriptions of these kinds of things in ancient writings going back thousands of years. So eventually it was shot down, but it's just one of the many descriptions of flying craft and spaceships that are found in the ancient Sanskrit writings of India.
Who we are and where we came from are two of the most critical questions anyone can ask. However, we're being given poor information on both questions. The ancient Sanskrit writings have clear answers and solutions to both questions.
The original constitutional position of the conscious self is to exist on a higher level of reality that I call the level of pure consciousness. In the ancient Sanskrit writings of India, it's called the world of Brahman. Brahman being a word for the spiritual essence. So on that higher level of reality, the all-conscious selves exist in harmony with each other. They are all engaged cooperatively along with the source of all conscious beings. It's a level of reality dominated by the mood of loving harmony. But if a conscious self becomes egotistical, domineering, exploiting, selfish, it can no longer exist on that higher level of reality. There must be some alternative reality where it can act out its desires, and that's the level of reality that we currently inhabit. And we're confronted with two choices. We can get more and more deeply involved in attempts to dominate, control, and exploit others, or we can try to understand that we're all beings of pure consciousness. There's no need to divide ourselves up into so many competing groups, no need to try to dominate, control, and exploit each other in that way. We can learn how to satisfy our material needs in the most simple, natural, efficient, and fair way possible, while putting most of our human energy into developing that resource of consciousness and trying to elevate our consciousness back to the state where we can exist on that higher level of pure consciousness.
In the ancient Sanskrit texts, many passages refer to avatars. But what exactly is an avatar? Can they exist on our plane of reality? If so, what is their mission? Are they the same as the enlightened beings mentioned in many other religions?
In the ancient Sanskrit writings of India, there's the concept of avatar. That's a Sanskrit word, and avatar means one who comes from a higher level down to a lower level. And in this case, especially for the purpose of giving enlightenment and knowledge. So although the conscious selves come down to this level of reality, to the world of matter, the supreme conscious self will also come to remind them of their original nature and offer them the chance to revive that original nature and return to the level of pure consciousness. So that same concept is found in many different spiritual traditions. It's there in Buddhism. They have the idea of bodhisattvas, enlightened beings who come to this world. It's there in Christianity. It's there in Islam. It's there in most ancient wisdom traditions. The idea that although we are in this world of matter, the higher being, who is our original source, makes some effort to communicate with us, even though we've departed from our original position. So yes, according to the ancient Sanskrit writings of India, the supreme conscious being, who has many names, one of them being Krishna, does come to this world. And that's when that manifestation of the supreme conscious being in this world is called avatar, meaning that although ultimately that supreme conscious being is completely transcendental to this world, completely beyond it, still to give knowledge and illumination, the avatar manifests here.
Our current human form, as a vehicle, has a dual function. You could say it allows us to function within the realm of matter. It's also a vehicle in which we can return to that higher level of existence or the higher level of pure consciousness from which we originally came.
The goal of the whole process is to be 100% in the consciousness of one's original state. Now, when a conscious self enters the world of matter, it takes on different forms or bodies made of matter according to its level of awareness. So, say in one lifetime, one becomes 5% conscious of one's constitutional state. And then in the next incarnation, one will take up at that point and maybe add another 5%. And in the next life, another 5%. When it adds up to 100% after so many lifetimes, then the conscious self can get out of that cycle of birth and death, the cycle of reincarnation, and be situated on the platform of eternal consciousness. So in one lifetime after another, we become different in the sense that we become more and more aware. In other words, there's a process of spiritual evolution. So in that sense, there's progress. Another way to look at it is in terms of like an actor. You know, an actor or actress has a personality apart from whatever roles that he or she is playing. And in particular films, you know, the actor or actress takes on many different roles, but really is the same person in a sense.
As we have established, according to Hindu scriptures, a soul resides in every living organism. After death, the body disintegrates, but our souls live on in another body. Is it possible to recognize a soul reborn in a new body?
There are many cases where people feel they've known each other from some other life. Now, how they recognize that exactly, I'm not completely sure. According to the ancient Sanskrit writings, each conscious self has its original form of pure consciousness. It's called the swarupa. Rupa means form, swa means self. So it means you have your own real form. The problem with most of us now is we can't perceive the real form of the people in our lives. We don't see that. And that's because any material form, it comes into being, it persists for some time, and then it is destroyed. Like in this lifetime, you know, I became a teenager, you know, I became a young adult, I became a middle-aged person. Now I've kind of entered into the elderly stage. So if somebody were just looking at the body, they wouldn't be seeing the real self. And, you know, sometimes it takes some shocking event for a person to understand I'm not really seeing my friend or my husband or my wife. You know, sometimes the shock comes at a funeral where you see the body being either lowered into the ground or put into the crematorium or whatever. And then you realize I never really saw the person that I love. So we have to understand who is the person really in their original form of pure consciousness that is animating this material body that I now see before me. Because that material body is only going to last a certain period of time. And then that conscious self within that body is going to go somewhere else. Now, it could either go back to its original form of pure consciousness, if it's qualified to do that, in which case, if you were able to perceive that person on that level of reality, it would be an eternal experience. It wouldn't ever change. But if we're talking about perceiving that conscious self in its original form, when it's covered by some temporary material form, that's another thing. Now, there are personalities who can do that, but they would be persons of a very high level of spiritual awareness that would be able to perceive the identity of the conscious self that may be in the body of a dog or a cat or another human being. You know, it's a very high level of awareness to be able to do that, but it's possible.
The linear perspective of history is now so accepted we only ever see ourselves as improving, advancing and evolving, especially concerning technology. But what if this theory is wrong? Is there an alternative theory, one that could explain the growing evidence for advanced ancient civilizations of the distant past?
The time concept of the cosmological writings of ancient India is cyclical. And we're all aware of cycles. There's the day-night cycle. We're aware of the cycle of the seasons. But the ancient people of India were aware of even larger cycles of time, and they were called yugas. And basically, there's a cycle of 4 yugas. The cycle starts with a golden age. It's called the Satya Yuga. And in that age, people are very spiritual. They're very unified. In the next stage, called the Treta Yuga, people become a little bit materialistic. They begin dividing themselves up into classes and groups and living not so close to nature. They start living in cities. And then in the next stage, called the Dwapara Yuga, things deteriorate a little bit more, and there's organized conflicts and things like that. Economic development going on in a big way. People have become less spiritual. And then finally, there's the age of Kali, which we've entered now, which is described in the ancient Sanskrit writings of India as being a time of ever-increasing social and environmental disturbance and degradation. And we sort of see that playing out around us in the world. But it's also an opportunity, in the ancient Sanskrit writings of India of what the age of Kali will be like. It says to get justice, you have to have money. Governments will exploit their people and make them very unhappy. The deserts will expand. The animals will become extinct and things like that. And it's all happening around us just as predicted. But just because it's raining, it doesn't mean you have to get wet. You can shelter yourself, you can shelter others, and make use of the opportunity to try to become completely self-realized, realize one's eternal nature as a being of pure consciousness.
Having heard the wisdom in these texts, you should now understand why the Vedas are the most important and forward-thinking documents ever written, and why some of the world's greatest minds studied them to enhance their knowledge. Over the last 200 years, people have been finding extremely ancient artifacts, such as hammers encased in stone dated to 400 million years old, gold chains in coal dated to 300 million years old, and small figurines in strata dated to 15 million years old. These remarkable discoveries do not fit with our current theories on human development. They do, however, fit into the Vedic worldview. Most finds of this nature are made by ordinary people who can be easily dismissed by professional scientists. But what happens when a team of highly respected geologists makes an earth-shattering discovery of this nature using the latest dating techniques available at the time? Are they applauded for their groundbreaking work, or does something entirely different happen?